They told you inflation was under control. They told you the economy was stable. And yet, gold, the oldest form of money on Earth, is quietly breaking record after record. But here's the strange part. This isn't just about investors panicking. Something much deeper is happening behind the scenes. Something that has been set in motion decades ago. Because if you study history closely, every time this pattern appears, a global financial reset soon follows. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this video from? Now, let's uncover the truth behind why gold is rising again and why history is repeating itself. In 2024, gold quietly surpassed $2,500 per ounce, reaching levels unseen in human history. At first glance, you might think, of course, inflation. Investors are scared. But the numbers don't add up. Inflation in the US has slowed. The Federal Reserve has even hinted at rate cuts. Normally, that should calm the markets. So why is gold, the metal of last resort, behaving as if a storm is coming? To understand that, we need to go back. Not to 2020, not to 2008, but to the 1970s. The last time the world experienced a silent monetary revolution. Because what's happening right now looks eerily familiar. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. The United States will suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. That one sentence ended the Bretton Woods system, the global agreement that had pegged world currencies to the US dollar and the dollar to gold. Suddenly, money became faith-based. The dollar was no longer backed by anything physical. And what happened next? Gold prices exploded from a 35 an ounce to over $800 by 1980. Why? Because the world suddenly realized that governments could print as much money as they wanted. And whenever paper money grows faster than real wealth, gold becomes the ultimate escape. Now fast forward to today. 50 years later, central banks are again printing, governments are again drowning in debt, and currencies are again losing trust. Sound familiar? Let's look at what's really driving gold right now. In 2023 and 2024, central banks, not retail investors, not speculators. Central banks bought more gold than at any time in modern history. According to the World Gold Council, they purchased 1,136 metric tons in 2023 alone, the second highest annual total ever recorded. The biggest buyers? China, Russia, Turkey, India, and Poland. But why would countries that already hold trillions in US dollars suddenly rush toward gold? Because quietly, they've lost faith in the dollar's future. In 2022, after Russia was cut off from the SWIFT system, many nations realized their dollar reserves could be frozen overnight. For decades, the US dollar was seen as neutral, safe, and unquestionable. But the weaponization of the dollar changed that perception. Now countries want something that can't be sanctioned, something that can't be printed, something that has survived every empire collapse. That's why China has been secretly accumulating gold through its state banks. It's why Russia has doubled its reserves, and it's why the BRICS nations are discussing a gold-backed trade currency. For the first time in decades, the world is watching the dollar's dominance fade. Central banks across Asia and the Middle East are settling oil and trade in local currencies, even in Chinese yuan. Saudi Arabia, the country that helped create the petrodollar in the 1970s, is now selling oil to China without using dollars. This matters because for nearly 50 years, the world needed dollars to buy energy, which created an endless demand for US currency. But if energy can now be bought in yuan or rupees, that demand starts to vanish. And when demand for the dollar falls, investors rush to protect themselves. They buy gold. This exact cycle happened before, during the late 1960s, when America printed money to fund the Vietnam War and social programs. Back then, foreign governments demanded gold instead of paper. The US couldn't keep up, and the gold standard collapsed. Today, Instead of physical redemption, nations are simply diversifying away. But the result may be the same. A silent, slow erosion of trust in fiat money. You see, gold doesn't rise only because of inflation. It rises when confidence in currencies falls. Right now, confidence is falling everywhere. U.S. debt crossed $35 trillion. Interest payments alone are now larger than America's defense budget. Global debt has reached $315 trillion. That's more than 3 times the size of the world economy. Everyone knows this can't continue forever. So investors, governments, and even citizens are quietly preparing for a future where paper money buys less and less. Gold isn't about getting rich. It's about staying solvent when everything else breaks. And the signs are already visible. Currencies from Japan, Argentina, Egypt, and Nigeria have lost massive value in the past 2 years alone. Every collapse has the same pattern. First confidence breaks, then the currency follows, and gold rises. But there's another side to this story. Human behavior. When markets sense danger, people don't run toward reason, they run toward safety. And safety isn't logic, it's emotion. That's why gold's rise often starts before the real crisis begins. It's the canary in the coal mine, a warning that faith in the system is fading. In 2008, during the financial meltdown, gold surged 28% while global markets crashed. In 2020, as lockdowns froze economies, gold hit new highs again. Now in 2024, it's breaking those records. History is whispering, but very few are listening. And that brings us to the next stage, the stage we've seen before, just before every global monetary reset. In the last part, we uncovered how central banks and entire nations are secretly hoarding gold again, just like they did before every major monetary reset in history. And now, as gold breaks records, one question remains. What happens next? Because every time gold rises this way, it's not just a market movement. It's a signal, a warning that the financial order as we know it is about to change. Let's go deeper into the history of every great gold cycle and how today's story might end exactly the same way. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And if you trace gold's behavior through the last 150 years, you'll notice an eerie pattern. Each major spike in gold prices coincides with a collapse in trust, not just in currencies, but in governments themselves. Let's go back to the 1930s. After the Great Depression began, the US government confiscated private gold and fixed its price at $35 per ounce. They did it to stop citizens from abandoning paper money. But that move exposed something deeper. Even governments feared their own money's collapse. Fast forward to the 1970s. Inflation exploded, the dollar fell, and gold soared 2,000%. That era ended only when interest rates hit 20% and confidence temporarily returned. Then came 2008. The housing bubble burst and gold doubled again. Every single time, gold doesn't rise because people want it. It rises because they've lost faith in everything else. And today, the same symptoms are back. High debt, slowing growth, currency wars, central banks trapped between inflation and recession, the ingredients for another monetary reset already on the table. Behind the headlines, world powers are quietly rewriting the financial rulebook. China has introduced its own digital currency, the digital yuan. India, Brazil, and Russia are building payment systems that bypass the US dollar. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is openly talking about a new global reserve system. Some call it Bretton Woods III. A future where countries trade not in paper currencies but in digital assets backed by commodities, including gold. And this isn't speculation. In August 2023, BRICS leaders announced plans to explore a new settlement currency backed by tangible value. If that happens, it will be the first time since 1971 that gold re-enters the global system, not as jewelry or investment, but as money. When that happens, gold yes price 1, T just rise because of demand. It'll rise because it will regain its purpose. It will once again become trust itself. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the US dollar. For nearly 8 decades, the dollar has been the world's reserve currency. But maintaining that dominance came with a price. Debt. The US spends far more than it earns, and every year that gap grows wider. For now, investors keep lending because they still believe in the dollar's power. But what happens when they don't? Here's the alarming data. The US debt to GDP ratio now exceeds 120%, a level last seen during World War II. The interest payments on that debt are expected to cross $1.2 trillion per year by 2025, more than the US spends on defense. And foreign holdings of US treasuries have dropped for 4 consecutive years. Nations aren't dumping dollars out of hatred. They're doing it out of self-preservation. Because the more America prints, the less their savings are worth. And when confidence finally breaks, the exodus begins. That's when gold steps in, silently, steadily, as the new anchor of value. It happened to the British pound in the 20th century. And if history repeats, it could happen to the dollar in the 21st. Even Wall Street insiders are starting to prepare. Major banks like J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs have raised their gold forecasts to record highs, not because they suddenly love precious metals, but because they understand psychology. Markets move on belief, and belief in fiat money is cracking. Meanwhile, smaller nations are quietly shifting too. Singapore, Thailand, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan all increased their gold reserves in 2024. And while the West debates inflation, the East is quietly building a gold-based safety net. We are witnessing the largest transfer of real wealth in decades, from paper to metal, from promises to permanence. Every empire falls the same way, not on the battlefield, but in its banks. The Roman Empire debased its silver coins until they became worthless. The British Empire devalued the pound until America took its place, and every time, gold outlasted them all. In 500 BC, 1 ounce of gold could buy a finely tailored robe. Today, that same ounce can buy a designer suit. 2.5 millennia later, gold's purchasing power hasn't changed. That's not a coincidence. It's the definition of real money. And yet every generation forgets, until they're reminded by crisis. We're living in that reminder right now. If history holds true, here's what could unfold next. 1. Debt spiral accelerates. Governments borrow more to pay interest. 2. Central banks cut rates again. Cheap money floods the system. 3. Currencies weaken. Inflation returns, slowly, then suddenly. 4. Gold revalues. It stops behaving like a commodity and starts acting like money again. And when that happens, the official price of gold may not just rise, it may reset. Just as it did when Nixon ended Bretton Woods, just as it did after the 1934 Gold Reserve Act. Each time, the world's monetary system rebooted, with gold as the hidden denominator. The same may happen again in this decade. The question isn't whether gold will rise. It already has. The real question is why it's rising. Because gold doesn't predict the future. It reacts to it. It's reacting to debt, distrust, and decades of financial manipulation finally catching up. We are entering an age where digital money meets ancient value, where algorithms trade fiat, and nations quietly stockpile gold. It's the same story, told in a modern language. And just like before, those who recognize the pattern early will be the ones who survive what comes next. So the next time someone tells you gold is old-fashioned, remember this. Every civilization thought that, right before their money became worthless. History isn't just repeating, it's warning. The real reason gold prices are rising again isn't fear, it's truth resurfacing. Because in a world built on debt and promises, the only thing that endures is value that can't be printed. Thank you for watching. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you seeing this gold surge the most? Your answer might just reveal the next chapter in this unfolding story. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, history always leaves clues for those willing to see them.